Hello, everyone. This is Jacob Pobio, the producer of The Apex. Has life ever taken you by surprise? Today, Jan and RJ interview Mr. Nick Changet. While Nick was pursuing a degree, his father went through 3 hospitalizations, and Nick was forced to drop out of school and take over the family business. Find out what lessons he had learned by tuning in. If you want to help support us, there are 2 ways to do so. One is to donate at www.patreon.com/The Apex Podcast. The other is completely free. If you learn something from this episode, all we ask is you share it with a friend. Please subscribe and hope this pushes you toward your apex.
Welcome, Apex Chasers, to another episode of the Apex Podcast. I'm your host, Jan Almasy, and as always, seated across from me is my co-host and partner in crime, Mr. RJ Holiday.
Never ever get tired of that intro. I feel like a
Neither does
WWE wrestler.
Yeah, I'll work on my announcer voice. So just as a prelude for everybody, if at some point throughout the episode my voice decides to disappear, I've been working a lot of overtime at the hospital lately.
My overtime then kicks in.
Yeah.
You hear me double.
I'm drinking. He's going to become a ventriloquist and talk for both of us. But so I'm drinking some honey tea to try to keep my voice good, but we'll see how this goes. So on today's episode, we are interviewing a gentleman that I've been friends with for a while, that we actually just reconnected not too long ago through virtue of our producer here at the Apex, Mr. Jacob Popio. We, all grew up in kind of the same area, so it's kind of cool how everything kind of comes full circle eventually. So we wanted to introduce this podcast, and to kind of, I like to give a general outline to try to get the feel of what the show is going to be about. Now, there's a couple of different conversations that we had before we turned the mics on. But one quote that RJ sent me says this: "The guys who fear becoming fathers don't understand that fathering is not something perfect men do, but something that perfects the man. The end product of child raising is not the child, but the perfection of the parent." Now, that's a quote by Frank Pittman. And as we dive into the story behind our guest today, you'll understand a little bit more about why that quote applies so much to what we're going to talk about today. And now the other concept came directly from our guest, and he was talking to me before we turned on the microphones about confidence and what confidence truly means in a person. Now, everybody thinks that confidence is, confidence in, I've trained for this my entire life, and now I'm going to go do it. Or being so well prepared for something that you're confident that you're going to take it over. I remember being in nursing school and being like, I studied for X amount of hours for this exam. I'm confident that I'm going to do well. But there's a different type of confidence that, our guest kind of brought up. And he said that it's a confidence that regardless of the amount of time that you prepared, regardless of the situation that life has decided to throw at you, that life has decided to throw at you.
Smack you with.
It's a confidence that you have the ability to get over it.
If you really break it down, it's situational confidence and then self-confidence.
Right. Yeah, so that's a good dichotomy. So confidence regardless of the situation that you're placed in, and then confidence in yourself that you have the ability to conquer that situation.
Any situation.
Period. Yeah, regardless of what it is. And that's something that I feel like is missing in a lot of people, and something that I wish would come out, and if you were able to get that out of this episode to become an Apex Chaser, because you now have self-confidence, or at least have a key into what that self-confidence looks like in another person, then we have done our job. So with that, I would like to introduce our guest of the day, Mr. Nick Changet. Welcome to the show.
How's it going, everybody? Thanks for having me here today.
Absolutely.
No problem. So, Nick, why don't you, let's just start off by, where did you grow up, and what are you doing currently?
I grew up here in Stark County, graduated from Lake High School. Currently working with my dad at his family-owned jewelry store there. I'm just kind of running day-to-day operations and everything like that alongside them, just learning as much as I can. I just started some training into getting certified. You can get graduate degrees in the jewelry industry, so I started that education progress, and I'm about a third of the way through there.
That's all. Where do you, Is that just like through a university? Is it?
Yeah, there's one university. They have 2 different locations, New York City and California, and you can take it online.
That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So what exactly does that graduate level degree entail?
It's basically like a 2-year degree for anybody else, but when I graduate with it, I'll be like a graduate diamond grader. So at that point, it says that I'm certified to like grade diamonds out. I know all about the industry, the diamond industry, and so on and so forth from there.
Gotcha.
I've had a couple family members who work in the jewelry business, and that is a very high up position from my understanding, being able to like actually look at a diamond, because I've seen one of the charts from grade to clarity and all that, and it's mind numbing.
Yeah,
and
for me,
also
I'm
it's also mind numbing to see the difference from the price difference between one step to another one is just through the roof.
Right. Well, and I can't tell the difference. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
some of them you can't, but then
well, obviously, if it's on like 2 totally different sides of the spectrum, it's like, oh, that makes sense. This one looks
if you
like
have
a
a
piece of
person-
gravel, and this
yeah.
one looks like a diamond.
If
But
you also have a person that says, "Hey, that's $28,000 for a diamond," you would hope that they probably know what they're looking at.
right.
So to know that, and that's the only school that does that,
There's a couple others, but there's only one that's like fully accredited.
the one that you're going to. See,
Yeah.
that's awesome. I mean, that would be something that I'd throw up immediately anytime someone is like, "Hey, what is this diamond worth? I'm looking for something like that." I mean,
Right.
I don't know what I'm looking at, and I hope someone that is telling me X amount of money I'm spending for hopefully something that is going to, be passed down from generation to generation,
yeah.
is what it says it's worth.
So speaking of generation to generation, like a little plug from, just to kind of, I just think this is a cool tidbit. Nick's dad, I believe, was your father, actually made my father's wedding ring. So like he took my great grandfather's band, fused it together with a new band, and made my dad's ring.
That's awesome.
Right. So that's awesome. So I'm probably going to end up, when something comes down the line, who knows when that will be, going to Nick and doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And getting, I think that would be sweet. And me and my dad have kind of had conversations about it where it'll be, 4 generations of Almacy and 2 generations of Changets that have,
Collaborated.
made the
Yeah,
rings
that's pretty awesome.
for a family.
See, that's what I've always I don't know. I think some people have a stigma that like, oh, guys shouldn't be interested in jewelry, but my family, especially my mom and my sister and all that, they are all about rings, necklaces, earrings, the whole shebang. And like, I always thought it was cool because my mom has always told us that she's had 2 diamond earrings that when at some point she's going to pass down into rings for me and my sister. So I'm like, that's just cool then, because then I can do what I want with it and then pass it down as I see fit. And then it's cool to think that, me and my sister both then have that piece of my mom.
You have it. Yeah, I was going to say you have a piece of your family lineage.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So give us a little bit of history on the jewelry store itself. When did it get started? How long has it been around? How long have you been involved with it? If you had to paint a picture of what Changet Jewelry was, what would it be?
The store started in 1955, so it's been around for
a minute.
Yeah.
That's when my dad was born, so it's been around 63 years.
Right.
Who's your grandfather started it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it started with my grandfather, who was Nick Changet Jr.
Okay.
That was his name there. And so then from
Wait,
there...
so that makes you Nick Changet the what?
Not technically, if they don't have the same middle name.
And that's what happened. So my dad's
okay.
Nick Changet the third. I carry a different middle name, so I don't carry a Roman numeral, but
Yes.
I am the 4th Nick in this
Gotcha.
timeline.
That's phenomenal. That's super cool. I'm like the 3rd Jan in mine. So there's like my Slovak grandfather, my American grandfather, and then me. And it's all either Jan or John. It's essentially the same thing. But I think that's something else that's lost too, is that family name.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's
Definitely.
really, really cool. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. So it started there, and then in the 70s or so, that's when my dad joined his dad, and then they worked together for a little bit. Shortly after that, though, he ended up passing away. My dad was left with the store at that point. So now, come full circle, about 37 years later, I joined him, and then I've been there for 3.5 years now.
Awesome.
So I've been around for
Just the
a minute
start.
there. Yeah, just to start, but been around long enough to know how everything's kind of going.
Cool.
So you're there part-time as you're going to school, or you're working there full-time?
Full time.
Full-time?
Yep, I've been there full time since I started. So I finished a finance degree from Kent State while working there full time, and then I'm working on this secondary degree, and I'm there full time also.
That's awesome. So, well, so that's where you're at now. Let's back up a little bit and we'll kind of work our way to our defining moment.
Sure.
As to, what's going to get into the meat and potatoes, so to say, of what this episode is. So you grew up in the area, right?
Yep.
Did you grow up in like Green, Hartville?
Hartville.
Mm-hmm. That's probably 3 guests now that we've had
All
that have been from Hartville.
See, I love Hartville Kitchen.
That area.
So I'm jealous that they live there.
Yeah. Hartville, Hardware.
You said you went to
Hartville
Lake?
Kitchen.
Yeah.
Did you wrestle for Lake?
No.
Okay.
Weren't you at St. Thomas for a
Yeah.
while? Okay. I was going to say, that's how I remember us meeting.
Yep.
Was when he was at St. Thomas Aquinas.
Gotcha.
Yep. 2 years there, 2 years at Lake. So.
Did you finish up at Lake?
Yep.
Gotcha.
So what all did you play sports in high school?
Yeah. I wrestled for a year, and then I was kind of done with that. We're not gonna get into that one, but golf.
But
and
you're in
tennis.
the room with like over a decade. Like we got like 26 something years worth of wrestling experience here
Between the
Yeah.
two of us.
between the two of us.
Yeah,
So
no thanks. I did it 1 year.
I was gonna say if you went to Lake, I know a ton of people that wrestled at Lake. I was like, do you know this coach?
Yeah, like wrestling's great. It teaches you a lot, but it wasn't for me.
It's not for everybody.
No,
but if
it's
you were able
definitely
to
a very
take
specific
anything away
sport.
from it, then wrestling
And
did what
that's
it was
what
supposed to.
Exactly.
yeah.
The lessons learned when doing that was huge, and the biggest thing there, like, it's all about timing when you start, in my opinion.
And see, second grade, I started wrestling. So
that's a
for
big
someone to start in
difference.
hye school,
Yeah.
that is
So-
That's a rough slope.
When you
to try.
different
go
hell.
for
Yeah.
you're at a D3 school, they fill the weight classes for varsity, and that's it.
That's all they have. Yeah.
You're starting. What I started with was like a 160 varsity spot as a freshman, not knowing what I'm doing.
May the odds be ever in your favor.
yeah, right.
And you know that those guys were like 185, cut down to absolutely nothing. And I was like,
you guys wrestled. Who'd you guys wrestle to?
oh man.
The Paris St. Graham?
Hmm.
No, they're a smaller school. It'd be
Yeah.
like Central Catholic.
D3.
Central, we wrestled against.
I know I saw him a couple of times at tournaments. I
Yeah.
knew that that's how we ran
a
into each
couple-
other.
couple tournaments
Gotcha.
with him, but
As far as
it'll
that,
teach you something. I mean,
yeah, it's definitely like the one thing that and I'll plug this for wrestling till the day I die, is that I loved wrestling because like you said, I cut from around 205 down to 170 every year. And so just that mental state of, I need to do this. It's a lifestyle. It's
Yep.
not, it does not leave when you go home. You go home and wrestling is with you 24/7. So that's the first piece. And then the second piece is that like, when you're out on that mat and at Canton South, they would always shut the lights off. You know what I mean? And it would be a spotlight, you shaking your hands with the guy across the mat that you were going to go to war with.
Yep.
And it's you versus him. No BS, no excuses. If you lose, it's on you. If you win, then props. But it was an all-out battle while you were on the mats, and you
definitely.
could not point the finger at anybody else. And I loved that about it. And even for a year, like just exposure to that, I think does a whole lot for somebody's mentality when it's just like, you know what? Sometimes life is going to throw you something, and it's just an all-out dogfight. You versus whatever life threw at you, and there's no excuses.
Exactly. And that's kind of like that big picture of wrestling for sure. Like my coaches, I'd go into his room and be like, hey, like, what are we doing today? And he's like, my goal is to break everybody on the team mentally. If they are not crying
That sounds
by
familiar.
the time we're done with practice, I did something wrong. So they pushed you physically, but the biggest thing is they pushed you mentally on top of that.
Yeah.
And there's going to be those situations that you're made be sitting in an office and you're not being pushed physically like wrestling would do, but that mental push that you're going to get and feel, that's what you need to
Stays.
like.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then we also, I got made fun of all the time because I wrestled, but I also played tennis.
You right?
I loved tennis. And that's something that people look at me and they're like, you were a tennis player? And I'm like, yeah, I loved it. It actually really helped with my footwork for wrestling.
Right.
Because all the side shuffling and having to mentally think about, okay, the ball's going to come here. And once you start to get good, not saying that I was, anything decent at tennis.
You weren't playing at Wimbledon?
No, I was
Oh.
not. I was not on that level at all. But we were decent for being a little, Canton South High School, the tennis program wasn't super popular. So we were decent and at least competitive. I'll say competitive. So one thing that I learned from tennis is that you have to be able to predict, just like wrestling. You're thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead. If I played doubles, so it's like if this person hits here, my doubles partner is going to move here. I need to think about the ball potentially going there, and this person doing this, and it's a giant mental game along with the footwork and everything. It did wonders for my wrestling game because by the time when I was on the mat, I'm only dealing with one person, but I'm thinking, okay, if I do this, he's going to do this. If I do this, he's going to do this. And it was, it helped a lot. How long did you play tennis for in high school?
Oh, I played all 4 years.
Was it all 4 years?
Nice.
What did you, if you had to try to wrap up, you said the big overarching theme of wrestling was discipline. I'm curious. What do you think the overarching idea behind tennis was, if there was one, outside of, maybe just stress
everybody
relief?
says like the most difficult sport, and like I'd agree with that, but my tennis career was more for fun. I just really enjoyed it.
That's good.
Like teammates, coaches, it's spring, just goofing off was like the biggest thing.
Yeah,
I
never remember like worrying about St.
not at
Thomas.
all. Like you don't have to
coming.
make weight, you don't have to do anything. Like you just got to show up and try and win. Like that's about it.
Yeah,
put some
tennis
practice
was a blast.
in. Yeah, that was like a nice, like calm, relaxing thing. Just fun.
So then, post high school, what you said you got a degree in finance.
Yeah.
So what prompted that pursuit? What got you interested in that career field?
Did you obviously? I think anybody who has a family-run business, is that what you wanted to do? Like going through school, were you kind of like, one day I'm going to join the shop?
So my college career was nothing but normal.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the best way to explain it. I went to 3 different universities in 5 different years, and I changed my major 3 times.
Hey, sounds just like me.
But with that, it was just like one of those things.
Gotcha. Now, when you went to all those schools, did it have like the, I guess, end goal that you were going to work at the jewelry business?
So growing up, we were never pushed into anything. Like our parents wanted us like to do what we wanted.
That's exactly how my parents were.
And they're like, like we have this store, but that's not what our end goal is for you guys, if that's the thing.
Gotcha.
And so going to school, that was never the push.
Gotcha.
What it kind of moved me into the different aspects is I started out thinking like maybe something in medicine.
Okay.
Quickly found out that the sciences was just not my
Mm-hmm.
thing. The actual medicine part of it would have been like great, but from the start to the end, there was no way I was getting through
all that.
So I switched into accounting, which is how my brain works. I am business minded through and through.
More numbers than anything.
Definitely.
Okay.
And then from there, took the accounting courses, kind of moved forward, and then did like some accounting internship deal, and I hated it. It was so I'm like, I'm going to switch it up one more time because I was still able to. It was early enough in my college career.
Well, see, then that's why I think
it didn't stop me.
I've always said that they should allow you to do internship or at least shadow work earlier than sometimes, because I know a lot of them, like with my girlfriend, a lot of their stuff isn't until like their last year of school. And I was just like, yeah, nothing like wasting thousands of dollars on something that, on paper looks great, but then you go and do it and you're like, this is absolutely miserable.
Oh, yeah.
So it's great that you were able to, see it firsthand what you were going to school for, and then, had the time and ability to be able to switch it up into, divert it into something else that you're interested in.
Exactly. And that's what then kind of caused me to switch up the university timeline.
Gotcha.
So starting here, I started local here at Walsh, lived at home, commuted, started that like med track, like, oh, that'd be cool. Halfway through the year, that's when I switched into the business end. It was great, but my buddy and I decided like, hey, we're both in business. Walsh is a great school for certain things.
Business not being one of them.
Their business program is good, but if you want to do anything with it, whether you're in the big 4 accounting firms or you want to go to Wall Street or anything like that in finance, you probably want a school that's got a little bit more behind it.
Prestigious in that demographic.
Exactly. So him and I actually looked at each other and ended up transferring to Ohio State.
That's cool.
And their business school down in Columbus.
Very nice. It's cool that you had someone that went with you too. It makes it a lot easier when you have, some form of support.
Definitely.
Cool.
So we ended up rooming together down there for that year.
And you finish up at Ohio State?
I did, and I finished up at Kent. So that was the final transfer.
The final
Gotcha.
university, but there was a road bump that led to that transition up to Kent.
Right.
And that's
Okay, so how long were you in Ohio State?
I was there for a year. So I was
Okay.
at Walsh for a year, and then I was at Ohio State for a year, and that's when everything kind of changed again.
Gotcha.
In between going into my junior year, so that after sophomore year summer, I guess you could say.
And ladies and gentlemen, this has led us to our defining moment.
Moment.
So why don't
You got the floor.
Yeah, you have the floor. Why don't we open up that can of worms?
So that summer was interesting. Needless to say, I had a summer job. I was working at a lumber mill.
Down in Columbus.
This was local.
Okay, so you come back up here for
Yes.
the summer. Okay,
Yep.
just
You're-
wanted
You're
this
kind
was
of a
the-
jack of all trades. You've done a little bit of
chopping
done a little
wood.
bit of
everything.
everything.
He's like, I
So,
was thinking about going to medicine. That didn't work out, so I decided to go to business school. Also worked at a lumber mill.
Yeah, I
You know
worked
what
at a
mean?
lumber mill for 3 summers in a row.
What did you do there? I'm just sidetracked, but I'm curious.
Everything. So we would cut lumber, load lumber into saws, build shipping pallets. So like every pallet that you've seen out there, I probably built one of them
Ah.
at some point. Like the guy who owned the entire company, his motto was build a pallet a minute, which
Well, now I almost feel bad for burning them 8 at a time.
like if you
All that hard work.
right. So if you think about it though, there's a lot of boards, there's a lot of nails, and like
You made a lot of
red.
rednecks happy over the years.
Oh, definitely.
That's
And
funny.
so, like, a normal day, though, I had to be at the lumber mill by 6 in the morning. I was leaving my house by 5:05, waking up at 4:30 every day.
Dang.
Just
Chopping wood.
loving life, And they would send out the work order, and you'd look at it, and it'd be like, this work order will give you 40,000 pounds worth of lumber to be loaded on a truck. So you're sitting in your mind going, I get to physically load 40,000 pounds through this saw today.
Awesome.
This is going to be a great day.
Yeah. Well, that's one way to look at it for sure.
Right.
That's why most
So-
lumberjacks you see are just peeled.
Yeah, yeah. That's why they can eat so many pancakes and not be fat.
All the syrup.
Exactly.
Right there.
So then, while I was at the lumberyard that early summer, it's a job where like things can go wrong sometimes. You can never be too safe.
Yeah.
I ended up getting injured on the job, which moved me into the office.
Gotcha.
And that's where I had that like accounting experience. And that's what kind of moved me even to changing my degree as
Oh,
well.
I see.
Was that little bit there.
It's weird
Gotcha.
how everything kind of falls
Works
into
out.
place like that.
Right. So then from the office, I was doing all kinds of different jobs throughout the summer, kind of working directly under the CEO and president, and everybody else just hated me for that because they would ask me to do random jobs. They never knew what I was doing, and I was just working on like bigger projects for them. So then towards the end of the summer, that's when things kind of like changed for me personally. My dad ended up having some health issues, which caused him to actually back off from the store. So at that point, that's when I stopped my summer job and moved into running his store while he was
So
off.
why don't let's dive into those. You say health issues, and people can, think of, oh, my dad got pneumonia or something. You know what I mean? But I think that the extent of the issues that your father experienced is a huge part of this story, and especially because it wasn't just one time.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was a series of recurring events that you forced your hand, so to say. So, what
So it
was
was
that
like
initial thing?
July 28th-ish or something like that. He ended up having a stroke. They went to a local hospital here. 2 days later, this hospital decided there was nothing that they could do for him at all, and life flighted him up to Cleveland Clinic at that point. From there, he had a surgery, was doing well. He was there for about a week, got home, he was recovering, and then at that point suffered a hemorrhage, which is like a secondary stroke at that point. So within 14 days, he had 2 strokes back to back.
Oof.
The first one had no like effects, which was great. Like
Lingering effects afterwards.
Right.
Gotcha.
you couldn't tell at all, like nothing. The second one, that did a lot of damage. And so it was to the point where like he knew who we were, but he didn't really know our names. There was
Ooh.
some aphasia things, so he had a lot of problems like when speaking or things like that.
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know what aphasia means, aphasia, there's two different types, right? There's receptive and expressive aphasias. So receptive means that like I could be saying a sentence to you right now and it sounds like Charlie Brown's teacher to you.
Well,
And
just
you don't
not, you're
understand
not
what it is.
processing
You can't
any of it.
receive information. And then expressive aphasia is in your head, you could be thinking, I want Taco Bell. But what comes out is I need to take my Coumadin.
Yeah, gotcha.
Like the brain doesn't connect to the mouth as far as expressing what
Gotcha.
your thoughts are.
Right. So then at that point, while he was recovering, I moved into running the store.
Had you had any previous experience working at your dad's jewelry shop?
The only previous experience was 2 weeks during Christmas while I was home in between my semesters. I would go in to like help out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The most I could do is tell you what the price was on the tag. I had no idea what it was, what it said, what it
Gotcha.
meant. Like,
So you were basically just thrown into the deep end.
right.
Gotcha.
It was like, so this is what you have to do. Go for it. Now, and so that's kind of where I just jumped in at first. Like,
So at
This is
first,
it.
did you, obviously, unless you just have nerves of steel, you're probably pretty terrified having to, this is something, a legacy that your grandpa has set up, and you're like, I don't know jack about what I'm supposed to do here, but now it's mine, and I am, basically indefinitely, or who knows, now running this business.
exactly.
So did it eventually get to a point where you're like, I like what I'm doing. Like, I like it here.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. The first couple weeks were probably the hardest,
Mhm.
But once you get past that, it was a lot easier.
Once you start learning what
I
you
had
need to do.
support. That he had other employees that were there. His mom was still working with him at the time, and so I had my grandma to fall back on.
Oh, okay.
But she was 88 years old, so like you have to be
Only so much help income from that direction.
right. But it was helpful. So I had a lot of help, which was nice. The store was only closed for, I believe, a day, maybe two, and that was it.
That's impressive,
Right.
honestly.
And then I was back in there.
So I kind of want to back up. And before we get into the timeline of the store, I think it's important that we address, what was going through your head, at that point.
Right.
I mean, okay, my dad just had a stroke. He made it through the first one. Second one was a lot more rough. I know that he's not going to be able to deal with the store. Was it kind of a family decision to get you to step into that position? And what was going on in your head where you're like, okay,
Yeah, I guess that is a good question.
This
Did
is
they
either
ask you
do
to
or
step
die.
up, or because I don't know if we ever said if you're an only child or you have siblings.
I have
or
an
any-
older sister and a younger brother. My brother, though, he was, still in high school. so
Gotcha.
he was-
So obviously he's not dropping
Right.
out of
Right.
high school to run a business.
exactly.
Yeah.
And my sister was helpful, but it wasn't her thing. And she actually was more helpful at home.
Gotcha.
Because she actually now is a special ed teacher, and she was able to like work with my dad every day to get all that relearning process taken care of, because he had to relearn, his addresses and
Everything.
right.
Gotcha.
And so
Gotcha.
she did
yeah, you're
that,
essentially starting from scratch.
right,
Yeah.
while I did what needed to be done. There was a little bit of a conversation. I kind of knew what was going on and what it meant.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of look around.
You
and-
start to get that feeling in your gut.
yeah,
where
you
you
can
know.
see the situation at hand. And at that point, it was like, okay, I sat down with my mom and I was like, hey, like, here's what I'm doing. I already called my previous employer and told her, like, I'm done.
I'm out here. Yeah.
Explained why. And then I was like, I'm going in. Like,
Mhm.
that's what's going on. I was like, you take care of him and I'll figure the rest out.
Gotcha.
And that's
So as we
basically
said from
what
the beginning,
happened.
really stepped up to the plate.
Right.
Yeah,
So
So what, as you were stepping into the plate, what was going through your head like that first day that you were driving to the store? What did that feel like? And what was going through your head as far as, I'm now having to step up into this position?
the tough thing about it was you really didn't have time to think. You only had time to react. There wasn't much thought. Like my drive to work was maybe 10 minutes. It's not a long enough time to really think like, what's going on here and stuff. You know, you spent that time just reacting. So you woke up in the morning, you got dressed, you know, to look professional. I looked, you know, around. I'm like, all right, here's my car keys. I'm like, well, here's his keys, but they're my keys today. You know, you just reacted. You didn't really think about it like that way. And I'm like, time to go, and we'll figure it out from there. You know, and everything was just more of a reaction. You'd walk in, you reacted to what was going on, and you just like tried to move forward and figure out like, okay, here's the day-to-day things that need to get done. Outside of that, you can forget
Play it by ear.
Exactly.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So what was like, if you had to think of something that was super frustrating or like a major obstacle in those early days of you taking over the store, is there something that comes to mind?
I think the hardest little bit about it was not knowing anything.
That's what I was going to say. The hardest thing would to be
You know,
like,
and it wasn't like
to
the
pretend
business.
you know what you're talking about.
In
that's
Nick
where that-
Changet's
that's where that
words, it was what,
confidence
the
came
price
in,
tag? Like,
you know?
I knew enough about the store to know what the price tag said.
Yeah.
That was the original quote.
And like it was like one of those things like people would walk in asking for my dad because they trusted him, they knew him, and they wanted to talk to somebody who had been there for 40 years. And then not having that experience, it was like some of these people would walk in and they're like, you know, you had to go from not knowing anything to trying to learn what he learned over 40 years, which is near impossible.
And you
in
don't
like
want
24 hours.
especially people who your dad built a rapport with. You don't want to like let them down just for sake of lack of experience. I mean
Exactly.
it's like it's not like I don't want to help you, but I mean I don't really know what more else you want me to do.
And then the other
Right.
thing is like you can't sit there and tell someone like literally I don't know anything about this.
Yeah, so you got
'Cause
to play
then,
the
like,
part.
Their confidence in you is gone.
Plummets.
Well, that would be like me as a nurse. You know, I've only been a nurse for, where are we at? 8 months ish, right? But I'm an ICU nurse. Okay. So I'm walking in and I'm taking care of patients on, you know, like yesterday, I took care of a patient that is, you know, was a post cardiac arrest. They were on cooling parameters. They were on blood pressure medications to keep their blood pressure up, heart rate medications to keep their heart rate moving. You know, all of this critically ill stuff. And if I were to walk in and tell that family member, be like, hey, I've only been a nurse for 8 months and I'm kind of starting to get the hang of it, but you know, I'm not really sure.
Right.
Then confidence all the way down.
Oh,
or you go in and be like, hey, this is my first time trying to start an IV.
Yeah.
And
they're like,
nope.
Why don't we get somebody else?
Right, exactly.
And so, you know, I did everything that I could. I learned as much as I could, as fast as I can. But the biggest thing is going back to that confidence thing that we talked about. Whether you know what you're talking about or you don't, if you are confident in yourself that you have an idea of what you're doing, they'll believe you. I mean, you can sit there and tell them, this is what it is. But unless you don't have to go outside of that, just stick within like your comfort zone and that you can be confident in the answer that you're giving them.
Right.
Don't lie to them.
Yeah.
or
Yeah, you
anything
don't want to
like
blow
that.
smoke at somebody.
No, you know, and I didn't know what I was doing. So if there were times that I didn't know what I was doing and they would ask a more specific question, I'd be like, listen, this is kind of new to me, but let me get somebody that can answer you this question.
Gotcha.
So that I'm not just making up something for you or anything like that.
I think that is a hugely underappreciated ability right there. Being able to check yourself and be, hey, I'm confident within, you know, A to C, but D through Z, not really super sure about. So A through C, I can answer all of your questions. I'm super confident in it. I can give you the rapport, you know, that you can trust me. And then, you know, if you don't know something, that's what saves me a lot of the time on the floor as a nurse. Is just like, hey, you know what? I've been around for X amount of time. You know, I'm really comfortable with this, X, Y, and Z. I was like, if I don't know the answer to a question, I will find it out for you.
Exactly.
I'm not going to lie to you up front.
No.
And people tend to trust you more if you're willing to admit that you don't know everything.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that some people have that backwards where it's like, oh my God, if I admit that I don't know something, they're going to lose my trust.
No, because you just have to make the decision as a person, and that's even a decision. Like, what decision are you going to make? Are you going to make that you're going to make something up and you're going to lose that person and with everything, or are you going to make the decision to make the right move and pull somebody in who's actually...
Well, even if you just have that confidence to also, be able to divert that responsibility onto someone else that you're close to and then have the confidence and to answer their questions and whatnot.
Right.
So, I mean, that takes a higher caliber of person and personality to be able to just, essentially say that you're wrong or you don't know what's going on here,
No.
but that you can then, rely on other people. Me personally, I think obviously stepping into that role that your father was in, being his store, it'd be very hard not to, admit like, I don't know what I'm doing here. That's my dad. He was able to answer all these questions, but then, to be able to take that back seat and then, rely on the other people that have been there longer than you, and then just rely on your own self-confidence to answer the questions that you know how to do. I mean, me personally, I don't think would have been able to do that, to be able to sit there and be like, I would hold too much pride in the fact that I am my father's son and that I should technically know everything that people are asking me.
Right.
And then to have to admit to somebody, I probably wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah. And it's hard. It was
absolutely.
hard. But like at the end of the day, you're sitting there going, okay, so today I'm at work and this is what's going on. This is what I know. I also know that the person that knows all of this, I can't ask him.
Yeah.
Because
see, that's even harder.
when I would go home at night, once he was finally home, because he was 3 to 4 weeks in a hospital, in and out, whether it was rehab or something else, when he was finally home, you'd have to go home, and whether you had a very stressful day or whatever, it didn't matter because you couldn't talk to him about it because it either frustrated him that he could not help you, or something like that,
or even frustrate you that he's in the predicament that he's in. You just take it for what it is at that point.
So we kind of just, there was like a separation of like
work's
going well,
and
at home, like you're there just how's it going? How are you today? Yeah, exactly.
I got that.
And so there was this separation, which was good. And the biggest thing that he had to do, though, also, which I'm sure was hard looking back on, is he had to trust me.
Yeah, absolutely.
He had to have the confidence that I wasn't going to do anything that either would jeopardize the store, hurt it in any way. That's a responsibility, and that's a confidence all the way around.
Yeah.
Which I think helps our relationship today, even that we work together.
Yeah.
Because he can look at me and be like, you know what, I'll be in an hour or something like that, and it doesn't matter because he knows that it's taken care
covered.
of.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
So I know that is a point that Jan wants to talk about at some point. But first, because I don't think we wrapped around to it, but obviously now, from what you've told me, you plan on sticking with the jewelry business because obviously you're going to school for it. What point did you get to, after all of this, where you were like, I'm where I'm supposed to be? Like, believe it or not, as much as my parents didn't force me into this career path, but now I'm in it and I'm like, hey, I like what I do now. I don't mind going into work every day. Right. And it's something that I'm even now okay with furthering my education on it. So was there a moment where you're kind of like, hey, I'm where I need to be now? There
was. I'm going to back up just a step, kind of walk you through a little bit more of this timeline.
Gotcha.
And then I can give you that answer.
Gotcha.
So that was in August. Took the semester off from school, moved home, was working 6 days a week. Took care of that.
Mm-hmm.
He came back in December, and that's when I decided, like, okay, he's back. We're good. I'm going to schedule 9 credit hours, which is 3 classes, just to not take this whole year off.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went back, took those 3 classes, and I was working while taking the classes, and he was there. That summer, instead of getting a summer job, I just stayed on with him. It was like, yeah, this is kind of the start of, I really like what I'm doing, but it's also kind of where I need to be.
Mm-hmm.
He's still, it takes a while to rehab all that stuff, no matter
absolutely.
where you're at. And so I stayed with him through the summer. Everything was good. A year later from everything that happened with him, his doctors decided, like, hey, you had some blockages here and there. That's what caused your initial problems. We want to check out some other things. And from there, that, I think it was September. He ended up going into open heart and having a triple bypass.
Oh my God.
And so at that point, I was scheduled for 15 credit hours because he was back full time, and I could kind of like swing into school 3 days a week, but swing into work 4 days a week and kind of like balance
Finagle
the
it.
two.
Yeah.
Once he had open heart, I was going to school. Oh no, I was 5 days a week, but I was like going to school in the morning and then going into work
At
in
night.
the afternoon or whatever, just kind of like juggling.
Transferring the responsibilities in the afternoon.
Right.
Gotcha.
But then it went from going to school 5 days a week and working 6 days a week, trying to like do it all because he was out again for another 3 or 4 months because of that. After all like that, I was in school full time again. He was back. Everything was really good. His health was much better. Everything was improving. At that point, once everything was kind of calmed down,
Mm-hmm.
that's when it was to the point where I like what I'm doing.
Awesome.
It was probably the 2 years of just reacting, because every time it was, here's a situation
You finally,
have to react.
you finally got into a position where you were able to enjoy it
Exactly.
and sit back and be like, "Hey, this is actually."
when you're moving and
You're like looking at it and you're like, okay, now I'm enjoying it by choice.
Well,
Yes.
from
Rather
everything
by
that he
situation.
said, there was never a minute in those 2 years that he had the time to sit there and enjoy it.
Right.
It was just like
Or to
he said, he was
process it.
reacting,
just
to all of
reacting,
it.
reacting.
and that's
reacting.
kind of how like that all transpired. It took a while, but then at that point, I was like, you know what? I really do like this. I like working with people. I like explaining like this is a piece of jewelry. This is where it comes from. This is what it's made. This is how it's made. And different things like that. I liked working in the family store and everything else. Like it was all just really starting to come together once everybody was able to like sit back and relax a minute, because that reaction, I mean, it was nonstop. It was go to school, go to work, go to the hospital, see how he's doing,
React.
go home, go to work, go to school. I mean, it was just, you never had a minute to even think for 1 second about yourself.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
You were just kind of doing what was the best for everybody else.
That's awesome. And just hearing you speak about it, like I've always talked about, doing something with my life that helps people, where I get to interact with people on a hands-on basis. And just from you speaking about it, when someone, whether it be earrings, a necklace, a wedding band, an engagement ring, you're working with people at a very like intimate time of their, existence.
Very emotional.
Yeah, absolutely. And I admire that type of position to be, part of someone's life when they're going through that kind of stuff. So
Definitely.
to me, from a completely outside person who doesn't know much about jewelry, just that aspect of the job is appealing to me.
Right. It's not out of the ordinary for someone to start crying in the store.
I cried too.
Right. It happens. Whether it's a piece that's been an heirloom for 150 years and we refinish it so it looks brand new, and we build up what was worn out, and they get it back and it's just like, what did you do?
Yeah.
You made it back to what we remember.
Yeah.
That original. And so those things like can just pull emotions that people aren't like ready to just
see, or right there, that they're usually not willing to, open up to a stranger. See, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome that, obviously I think that emotional attachment goes more to jewelry than most other, family heirlooms and stuff, because, there's that financial investment behind it and what it symbolizes for a lot of stuff. So, unless you're a little kid, there's not a lot of people, coming and bawling tears of joy when they see a refurbished, stuffed animal.
Right.
But like you said, a refurbished necklace or earring or any type of family heirloom or something like that, it really draws out the, inner emotional attachment to that kind of stuff.
You mean like great grandma's diamond means more than the Build-A-Bear?
Yeah, well, not to my sister. My sister has a stuffed rabbit named Bunny, and I'm pretty sure she'd kill for it.
Oh my gosh. I remember,
Don't
this
take
is
the
going to
bunny.
be
Yeah,
totally
don't touch
off
it.
topic, but the whole Beanie Babies thing that was huge for a while.
Oh, no,
My
that's
sister-
different, because
My
there's
sister
Beanie
has
Babies
those
worth
things
like
are worth
thousands
like
of
ridiculous
dollars.
amount of money.
You
could buy a diamond for a Beanie Baby.
Yeah.
Like you could go in there and barter, be like, yo,
Jewelry-
I got
they have
a
a
limited
specific-
edition polar bear. Here, I'll trade you that for this engagement ring.
They have a
Right.
specific section of the jewelry store for one-to-one trades, Beanie Babies to diamonds.
Yeah.
Exactly.
X Beanie Baby is worth X diamond.
Yeah. He did hint on earlier that now, like you said, your father's back, and now it's like a codependency on each other when
Yeah.
it comes to running the business. So
And
how
that's
was it like?
yeah, that was a huge concept. I remember. So, I generally like to spend quality time with my guests before they come on. RJ is his own being, and he likes to come in pro bono, which is good because it's a totally different perspective. He's just
I gotta let it rip.
I will humbly admit that you have this weird innate ability to active listen that I will never be able to touch on or fathom. So,
because I just
props.
there's
but-
nothing going on up there. It's just strictly ears.
So me and Nick actually we hit a workout together, and one of the things that we were talking about during the workout that really kind of sparked my interest is, when your dad did come back, instead of saying there was this power struggle or he tried to force himself back in, or you tried to force your way in, like to keep the position. A lot of times people, when they take over something, are afraid to let it go. That's the other half of this story that I think is so cool and interesting, is that not only were you willing to step up to the plate, you were also willing to go back to the dugout when it was your dad's turn to step up again. And now you guys both kind of have, like you said, you have that rapport where he respects you and the ability to run the store, and that he has this, depth of knowledge that you can lean on. What was that transition, like for you guys interpersonally as he started to come back to the store, and you guys kind of leveled? There was I'm sure there was a newfound level of respect between the both of you.
There definitely was.
As far as man to man, father to son.
I think it was one of those things he saw how it was going. He knew that it was taken care of, and he didn't have to worry about it. He knew that it was in good hands. But then when he came back, he really kind of could see okay, everything is how I left it. Everything's running smoothly. We're good. And it was kind of like a moment for him where he could be breathe a little, for sure, knowing that it's still the way he left it. There wasn't any major crazy changes. Or
The store
like
didn't
that.
burn down or anything crazy.
And then it allows him to move in. And the thing is when you own your own business, it's very hard to take time for yourself. You get into this groove where you really don't take time off because you really can't. I mean, it's you basically when it's
It's
a
like
smaller.
if the studio is in where you live,
right.
You constantly look down the hallway and you're like, oh, I should be working.
Exactly. So it's one of those, but now it's to the point where he knows he can take a day and either get something done that he wants to, or just maybe he needs just an extra day off or something. He knows that he can be Nick's going in today. I'm good. It's taken care of. And I can bounce that off of him. When I was finishing school, I was it's a little nerve-wracking for me to step back after 2 years of go on it and then go sit in a classroom. But I knew that he was there, and I'm you know what?
Be okay.
Yeah, it's going to be fine.
And I know you obviously working on teams throughout your life and whatnot, that you can, attest to the increase of productivity when you can comfortably rely on the other people in your group to handle what needs to be done.
Right.
And then vice versa. They are then able to rely on you to get done what is set forth in front of you to be done.
Right. I think that's huge when it comes to teamwork between, one of the things that I do military side currently is the, it's called the student flight program. So it's, kind of okay. So before I dive into this, I have to say that my opinions are my own opinions. They do not reflect the opinions of the Department of Defense or the United States Air National Guard as a whole or the United States Air Force. Okay, these are my own personal
disclaimer.
Yeah, these are my own personal opinions. So, yeah, my JAG, which is a military lawyer, would not be happy if I didn't say that. So the student flight program, I'm in charge essentially of a group of 30 to 50. I haven't had any less than 30 my entire 2 years that I've been in charge of it now. 18 to, I think the oldest person I've had is, 28-year-olds that are just enlisting into the Air National Guard. And so my job is to train them up, to send them down to basic training and set them up for success when they come home. So I'm teaching them, customs and courtesies, basic leadership concepts, rank and regulation, how to stand at the position of attention and get screamed at without pooping yourself, like that
All
kind
the
of stuff.
essentials.
Right. And so the biggest thing that I try to teach them is, like you said, with the teamwork. And the biggest thing I think with teamwork, and you could probably attest to this with your dichotomy with your father, is understanding the importance of your position, but also empathizing with the importance of the other person's
Yeah,
position.
absolutely.
Exactly.
So what I tell them is like, you are going to come back after, Air Force basic training, I think is 7 weeks right now. It was longer when I went through 6 years ago. I'm not really sure what the exact length of time is right now. But regardless, you go through X amount of weeks of, you're told when to wake up, when to go to sleep, when to, go to the bathroom, when to do PT, how to tie your shoes, how to fold your shirt. You have this structure. And then you come home, you go to tech school, you learn your job, you come home, you're like, okay, I've earned the right to wear this uniform. I'm going to do cool stuff. And then you get stuck sweeping floors. It's like, what do you do with that? You just went through all of this stuff and you're like, really?
Not using any of it.
I'm shining tools or I'm pushing a broom. And I was like, you need to understand that your piece of the puzzle is exponentially important, because if you weren't doing that job, then somebody else would be doing that job. So if you have, like me as a staff sergeant, if you volunteer to take out the trash, that's one less thing that I need to worry about. And I'm able to go and train this group of 30 people. But if I have to think about, I need to take out the trash, I need to mop the floors, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. And I still get down there, I take out the trash with my guys, and my girls that are underneath of me. We make sure that we're a team, and I show them, hey, like, I'm willing to do what you're doing. But if don't establish that rapport as far as the dichotomy of the teamwork and everything, it can be horrible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you establishing that with your dad, where it's like, hey, if you need to take a day off, I got this. Or if he needs to take a day off, he knows that you have it. That teamwork is just, it can make or break something.
Oh, definitely.
Whether it's a group of 30 or it's in between a father and a son.
Well, and that's for sure. And like anytime I feel like you go to work for your dad or something like that, it's always going to be more difficult because it's just
that level of,
it's
expectations.
just not even that. It's just two different generations.
Yeah.
We come from the generation of social media and all this other stuff, whereas his generation doesn't. So if you go to him, you're like, hey, I want to do a social media marketing campaign.
He's like,
that's going to be like, I don't know what the
Dad,
heck
I want to
just
go on a
said.
podcast. What?
Yeah.
Something like that is what can be tough. And then that's when you guys are going to probably butt heads.
Mhm.
But since like we have this like understanding, we're able to like just kind of like talk about it and then move on. Because he knows that I'm going to handle the one things that need to be handled that he doesn't want to deal with. And I know that he can handle like the other stuff that I don't want to
That's
deal
good.
with. So we have this like a more of a better, well-working relationship than if you were to like come in and just try and change a bunch of stuff because you're some fresh new kid out of college. Like,
Right.
I know all this because I have a degree, and it's like
Boom.
you do, but you don't because you have zero experience.
Yeah.
Mic drop. All right. Cool. I think we can end the episode right there. No.
But that's like where it's at,
Yeah.
And
No, 100%.
that's probably the biggest thing that we have, which makes it so great. It's just we have that relationship.
That is a huge concept. And that's something that I do teach in student flight, where it's like you're coming in. I tell people they need to learn and be comfortable with being the bottom of the totem pole.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, listen, being the bottom of the totem pole isn't a bad thing. I was like, the top of the totem pole wouldn't exist without the base.
It's true.
Think about that.
Oh, yeah.
The eagle on the top, if the grizzly bear was not at the bottom holding that thing to the ground, eagle wouldn't be above there. You know what I mean? And all of the structure relies on motivated, good base level employees, airmen, Marines, military members in the civilian sector. You know what I mean? All of that stuff relies on having a good followership. Mm-hmm. So I actually give, one of the things that I talk to them about is called the art of followership. And you really quantified it super well, where it's, I know that my dad, i.e. upper level management, is going to take care of the things that I don't want to have to take care of. And he can rely on you to take care of a separate group of things that he doesn't necessarily want to have to deal with. But since both of you have experience running the store, now you have somebody that's like, hey, I can focus on long-term vision and he can run the day-to-day, but you guys are interchangeable, so you can flip-flop. Yep. That's kind of how me and RJ are now, where we've gotten to the point now where it's, hey, I'm not comfortable with this section of where we want to move to in the future. This is your vision. Own it.
Exactly.
And I trust him wholeheartedly to run with it. And then me, he's like, I don't like preparing for episodes. So I'm like, cool. Well, I can handle that piece, and I handle it wholeheartedly. And I know that when he comes in, he always is able to direct the conversation in a way that I would have never thought possible. Right. So we have this great dichotomy, and that's all life is a series of, back and forth, but that mutual respect for each other is huge.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just a simple relationship. No matter what, you got to work together, whether it be in a personal relationship or in a work relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what it comes down to.
Any type of relationship. And I think this is a good way to kind of tie up this whole episode is the level of respect and understanding someone gets from you when you're able to go into a situation, a day, an event, an interaction with another person, and do and be your best on your worst day.
Oh, yeah. The kind of like this overarching thing that we've hit on multiple times is this confidence. And I'm just going to hit it one last time here in the end, because that's probably the biggest thing that I would want to share with someone is be confident in yourself. If you make that decision, take it. And whether you learn from it and it was maybe not the best decision or it was the right decision. But that confidence in yourself, there will be a moment where you realize that you are confident in yourself. And it might be somebody asking you a question where you're like, oh, you know what? I did take care of that. Or you just look back and you're like, you know what? That was something that I did learn from. And there might be somebody that tells you, you're making the wrong decision. Because when I took that semester off, that's what someone told me. And it was someone that's close to you. They're like, hey, you need to go to school. You're making the wrong decision to help your, basically to do what you're doing. And I was like, I'm confident in what I'm doing is the right decision. And you just have to be confident in yourself. Whether you're just, you're starting out in the gym and let's say you don't know what you're doing or anything like that, ask somebody, but go. Yeah. Be confident in yourself to make yourself better. There. Exactly. Or you want to learn something new, but it's extremely difficult. Yeah. Just self-credibility, be yourself and be confident in what you're doing. And that's it. And you're going to look so professional and you'll be such a leader when you have those things because people will trust you. When you can look them in the eyes and say, this is what I am. This is who I am as a person. And this is what I bring to the table. They're going to be ready to sit down and work with you over and above if you're going to just not.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think what I kind of mentioned before, if you start with a good base level of self-confidence, then you can build that into situational confidence. And then it becomes all-encompassing confidence.
Exactly.
Perfect. Honest to God, I don't think I could have wrapped that up better than what he said himself.
Yeah, so I'm going to end this with a little shout out. So you saying that really reminded me. We did this is, early inception of the Apex. This is before RJ was a host. It was actually right after I recorded his initial episode. I interviewed a gentleman named Jason Hom. He's the owner of Expermac here in Canton. And there was two quotes that I have written down here from him that really, as you were talking about that, it made me think of these quotes. So the first one is, over planning can freeze you in fear. Get out there and do it. Make mistakes and learn. Okay, so that's the first one where, like you said, you need to own it. When life throws you that curveball, you're not going to, you have zero chance of hitting it if you don't swing.
Oh, yeah.
You have to at least give it a shot. And then the other quote is, if you decide that you want to own your successes, you have to also decide to own your failures.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean? And so that's like, once you put yourself out there, you might be able to want to tell everybody about all the home runs, but you also have to own the strikeouts. I don't know why I'm so focused on baseball right now, but
Right.
that's like the best way I can think of to describe it. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, for sure. And I had a business associate tell me this recently, and it's going to stick with me forever. When you make a decision, never back out of it, because that shows that you're not confident in yourself and that there is a weakness in what you're doing. Whether it's making a simple bet, like, hey, like, I bet you this. If you say, like, yeah, let's take that bet, don't back out on it. Be confident, win or lose, you're there.
Yeah. I, probably 90% believe in that. I will give a 10% dichotomy to, if somebody is looking at you and being like, yo, like, you're going to drive the business into the ground. If you do this, obviously there's situations,
Definitely.
and I'm always that devil's advocate that's like, if
Put into mind the person's
what I mean?
credit
Yeah.
that's telling you that.
Exactly. Yeah,
No,
Just a
exactly.
little bit.
Sure.
So just make sure that because sometimes people can get so tunnel visioned and so blinded by their ego that they're like, I made this decision and I'm going to stick to it.
Yeah.
That they refuse to, somebody with exponential amount of experience. I'm sure in the store,
Oh, for
if
sure.
you had made a decision and you were like dead set on it and your dad was like, that's stupid.
You
You'd
might
be like,
listen to it a little
at
bit.
least give it some
You
credence
gotta
and
let
listen to it.
that ego like go, because
Exactly.
that confidence isn't an ego. Confidence
There it is. Yep.
100% different than an
That's
ego.
what I wanted to hit right there.
People
Confidence
let it bleed
is
into the
way
same
different
thing, though,
than an
and
ego.
that becomes problematic.
No.
Yeah, being confident in yourself is being confident in your knowledge and your ability to do things the right way. Having an ego is being completely blind to everybody else's opinion and believing that your opinion is the only correct one.
One that matters.
Okay. So with that, I think that you did a really great job of summarizing everything that we wanted to hit. So we're going to, link this episode back to confidence, pushing yourself, stepping up to the plate, making sure that, no matter how many times life tries to hit you, like Rocky says, it's about getting back up, not how many times. It's how many punches you can take and keep moving forward, right? So with that, I do want to give a shout out to our Patreon campaign. We are the Apex Chasers, as we like to call ourselves here at the Apex Podcast. If you would like to become a member of the Apex Chasers, all you have to do is go to www.patreon.com/the Apex Podcast. There's a big orange button there that says become a patron. All you have to do is click on that button. The lowest amount is $1 a month. We appreciate everything.
Any little bit helps.
Yeah, 90% of those donations come to help us continue to, like me and RJ are going to be traveling to Indianapolis here at the end of the month to go get an interview with a pretty high-profile individual. So, it allows us to do stuff like that in order to bring you guys the highest quality content that we can possibly give you. Also, it will allow you early access to our Chase the Apex clothing, which you've kind of seen, shouted out on Instagram thus far. Me and
Not
RJ
that I
are
don't have it
currently
on right
wearing it.
now.
But it'll give you early access to that. And when we do our exclusive release here in March, and you will be able to consider yourself an Apex Chaser and a part of this movement. Other than that, RJ, are there any parting words?
No, I mean, other than this was a really good conversation. We hit on a lot of good stuff. It's my pleasure to meet you and have you on. I learned a little bit about myself, about Jan, about you, and what you've been through. And I think anybody listening to this, especially with how we capped everything at the end, there's a difference between confidence and your ego. And if you're confident in yourself, you can then funnel that confidence into basically anything that you want to do with your life. But that concept in itself is one that I think a lot of people don't have nowadays. And if this conversation can, spark anything in anyone to be confident in what they're doing now, or give them the confidence to do something that maybe they were afraid to do, or a position they're afraid to step into, then if it can do that, then we've done our job.
Exactly.
Yep,
For sure.
I 100% agree. So with that, Apex Chasers, we will see you again in 2 weeks. make sure that you tune in the off weeks to the Apex blog. This coming week, we are going to be releasing a blog post by John Dietz. He was one of our former guests, and he is starting a blog called The Spartans of Kindness. So if you want to learn more about, he talked about his 10 bullet points. He actually has a lot more than 10.
Way more.
That blog is going to continue to grow and continue to offer good content. So make sure you check into that. Other than that, I hope you guys have a kick-ass week. Keep chasing your apex.
See you next time.